Welcome to Feminine Roadmap Podcast. I'm your host, Gina Farrar. Each week, I bring you an inspiring conversation to help you navigate the challenges and changes of midlife so that you can not only survive, but thrive in your second half. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. It is Gina here, and today we are going to be talking about raising an aging parent with Dr. Ken Druck. Ken is a thought leader, an author, and a speaker. His life work is in courageous living, and he is going to be sharing his Amazon's #1 new release book, Raising an Aging Parent, and all the things that aging parents bring into our life. So many of us are in this place right now. Obviously, I'm in that place. So I wanted to welcome you, Dr. Ken, to the show today to have this impactful conversation.
So good to be with you, Gina. And thank you for sharing your living room with and your audience with me, and that we can talk about the second half of life that happens for families.
It's such a, almost, it's coming, but there's a bit of a confusion to it. There's a bit of an overwhelm to it because as our parents get older, there's this navigating. How do we engage with them? How do we talk to them? How much do we do? How little do we do? So tell me a little bit about your book and what brought you to write that book.
I wrote a book about 3 years ago called Courageous Aging, Your Best Years Ever Reimagined. And it was the first book that I had written about aging and what it's like to be getting older, and the invitation to buy into all the old myths and misconceptions about getting older and the program for getting older, and to really opt out and to reimagine what we want our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond to be. And that book really caught fire and was a bestseller on Amazon. Yet when I went around the country doing courageous aging workshops and leading community conversations on aging, the audience that came out and was most curious and wanted to talk were the millennials, were younger people, or not even millennials, but anybody, let's say, between 25 and 55, 60, 65, who were helping their parents, who had become caregivers to their parents, who were in the sandwich generation, who had, lives of their own and kids of their own and companies of their own, and were trying to have their own health and take time for themselves. And yet they had aging parents who were demanding greater and greater amounts of their time and attention, and parents who were growing older. And they wanted to talk about that. Am I doing enough? Am I not? Am I doing too much? How much is enough? How do I not get resentful of how much time I'm taking away from my own life to help my parents? How do I help my parents put their house in order? How much responsibility do I bear, to make sure that their estate, that their health directives, that, all these things are in order. Am I responsible if they need to move out of the family house to help them downsize and and when they have health concerns and they're not paying particularly close enough attention, is it my job to kind of become their advocate and to take them to medical appointments, or to oversee that, to make sure they take their medicine, their medications? So all these questions, and one that came up recently is, when is it time to tell your parents that it might be time to stop driving? So all of these questions are things that I address in Raising an Aging Parent, and with the idea that raising an aging parent isn't dismissing them, taking control, taking over for them, disempowering them. It's truly loving, supporting, understanding, and raising them up so that they can meet the challenges they're facing as they get older.
It's less parental on our part, is what I hear you saying.
Exactly.
So when you say raising, it's more of elevating, honoring, coming alongside.
Exactly. we have an invitation to bring our best self as a son or daughter, or to act out the dramas of our past, to be fighting with our siblings over mom and dad and who's the family hero, or to be arguing with our parents because they trigger, feelings that we've had since we were 8 years old of mom, stop that, or dad, that's inappropriate, or, whatever. How can we somehow show up in service and support and in forgiveness in many cases with our parents as they face the challenges, but also to harvest the opportunities that are coming all of our way as they get older? Because we know that as some parents, as they get older, become softer, more approachable, more loving, more understanding. They have more perspective of what really is important. How many of us have heard that, from our parents, that they were better grandparents than they were parents, because parts of them have ripened. Parts of them can be more nurturing and caring and patient and understanding.
And that could really cause a bit of resentment too. This navigating, raising our aging parents is a very emotional journey.
It sure is. It sure is. And for some people, I just want to make sure that if one of your listeners is sitting there saying, you know what, the damage that was done between me and my parents is irreparable. They're unreachable, unapproachable. I'm tired of fighting with my mom. I'm tired of the resistance that my dad's, but you know what? It's real that sometimes, despite our best efforts, we need to draw healthy boundaries with our parents and our siblings, because they just aren't reachable. They aren't in a place where we're going to be able to give them our best and work with them and make peace with all the things that could be sources of conflict.
Setting healthy boundaries. So let's talk a little bit about when you are caregiving for your parents. And it is becoming one of the roles and responsibilities. The tables have turned. It could be physical care, emotional care, medical care. How does a person do that in a way that, and I know it's different for every person, but let's kind of pull back a little and say, okay, if someone's moving into that season of their life, how can they do it in a way that's the most in support of not just their parents, but themselves?
Yep. That's great. First step, I think, is to realize that our roles are reversing. If they were a nurturing mother or father who took care of us and watched over us and brought us up and along in our lives and have been there for us, that the seasons of life are changing. And I think the realization, sometimes it happens in a second. We look over at a mom who's limping, or a dad who's at the doctor's, or some element that shows us they're getting older and they need us, and that we have an opportunity to be there for them. And I think that's the first step, is to acknowledge that things are changing and that what you're feeling is normal and natural. It's what people feel when things are changing. If it's a little unsettling, sometimes it's sad. Sometimes we are grieving the loss of our younger parent, the parent that we're used to and that we knew that our mother to be. So that's the first step. The second step is to really see, what is the invitation? What's the call to action here? What am I being invited to do here? And, to get clear about that. Am I being invited to move them into the family home, to build a granny flat in our backyard, to become the hub of my mother or father's medical care? What's the invitation? We need to be clear about that. And, even in conversations with our parents, to say, Dad, would it be helpful if I could take you to the doctors? If that's possible, just to know what you would want and what you're open to. So we have a conversation, a clear agreement about what the invitation is, so we don't become the hovering, adult child who's hovering over our aging parent and actually causing anxiety, causing them to push back, causing them to push away. There's a great scene that Diane Keaton was in another great movie last year, I think, and in which her husband had passed, and her kids, her 3 daughters, were hovering over her. Mom, you can't do this. And after about 2 years, she started dating again, and they continued to hover. And finally, she said, "Leave me alone, please. You have to trust that I know what I'm doing. I'm capable. I'm all here. Stop doing what you're doing. Go take care of your own families. If I need your help, I will ask for it." So it's we need to know what the deal is, what the invitation is. The third thing is to be honest with ourselves about what resources, time, energy, and availability we have for becoming a caregiver. To what degree we can become a caregiver without completely neglecting our own lives, our own health, our own family, our own kids, our own business, our own career. What can we reasonably begin as a starter to do as a caregiver in service to our mom or dad? And we have to take inventory of that, because sometimes it's something we're going to have shared responsibility for with a sibling, where we have to call a brother or sister, say, "I'm going to need your help with mom or dad," or with a professional caregiver, somebody who we bring in, to make sure that dad's taking his medications, because he just can't be relied upon. He took 2 doses of a medication that could kill him if he overdoses. And we cannot afford that. And yet I cannot afford to drive 30 miles over to dad's house every day to make sure this is happening. I need professional resources. So sometimes, and hopefully we can afford them, or hopefully these are resources that are available in our communities to people who are struggling financially and cannot afford them, because in many of our communities, senior resource centers and senior programs have these resources. But anyhow, we got to take inventory. And then I think we have to, once we've come to a clear agreement about what we're going to do as caregivers, we need to be consistent in following up. We need to fine-tune the plan. It's not set in concrete. It should be flexible, and we should make modifications where we need to, because we need to make sure, and this is step number 5, that we're also taking care of ourselves. That self-care, there's a code of self-care that comes with becoming a caregiver to our parents or one of our siblings or our spouse. And that means that we commit ourselves to our own health and well-being by making sure that we take time to come up for air, we take breaks, we fill our own cup with things that replenish and renew our energy. We get enough rest, we balance rest with activity. We delegate responsibility appropriately to other people who can complement what we're able to give and offer. And I think that's part of our self-care. But all of these things have a thread that runs through them. And there are other steps. The last one, by the way, is appreciating ourselves, is acknowledging ourselves. We're not going to get a trophy. We're not going to get called up before a large audience as the son or daughter of the year. But in many cases, we're not even going to get the appreciation, the full appreciation that we might deserve from our mother or father or other siblings. So we need to make sure that we appreciate and acknowledge and validate ourselves for what we have given as a son or daughter, that we stamp our own hearts with a "you're a good son or daughter" badge. So I think that's important. But what I was saying about the thread is, the thread that runs through all these things is open communication. And open communication means that we don't take over in all cases. We try to communicate openly and honestly and directly in a forthright way with our parents, that we communicate with our siblings, because we often discover that one sibling is even more effective at delivering difficult messages or having sensitive conversations, that we communicate with our parents' doctors or lawyer or advisor, or perhaps their brother or sister who they really, really trust and who seems to be able to broach sensitive subjects with them. So open communication needs to be threaded through all of these steps and stages.
As you're talking, and I'm taking notes, of course, boundaries. It is an interesting dilemma to set boundaries in reverse like that. We're used to culturally following our parents, doing what our parents say, being influenced by our parents. But I think that what's happening is where the shift is happening, and it doesn't feel comfortable for a lot of people. And it's hard to say no because you could feel like a bad child.
There you go.
Ultimately, we feel like children when we're dealing with our parents. Am I not correct on that?
Yeah. And we could also feel angry at our parents. Like, hey, you're supposed to be the parent. You asking me to give up my childhood? I may be 45 years old, but you're asking me to give it up. I'm not willing to stop being your son or daughter. I need you, Mom. I need you, Dad. And so sometimes we feel like we're resigning from our interdependencies with our parent, the ways that we look to them. And the truth is, we don't ever need to do that. We can continue to need them and ask for their help, love, and support. My mom was 92 years old, and I would have her read the manuscripts. She was brilliant in grammar and as an editor. And I would give her chapters from my new books. And I would say, Mom, could you help me? How are people going to read this? Or is there anything in this that interrupted the flow of what I was trying to say? And she was a great editor, and she loved doing it. So the things that our parents can still do, the ways they can still be there, the loving, tender touch and advice and counsel and ways that we share history with them can all be a part of it. And yet we can also be doing more on their behalf and are often expected to be doing. And that's the new balancing act of what happens when our parents get older.
What do you have to say for the person who doesn't have that great of a relationship with their parents potentially? Maybe that interdependency that you mentioned is more codependent or unhealthy, but yet maybe they are responsible for the parent, and there's maybe conflict in their own mind, because I know there are people who don't have good relationships with their parents. Yep, exactly. So what advice do you have for someone who may not be in good relationship with their parents and are finding themselves wrestling with these things?
Yeah. Well, I guarantee that there's a bunch of people listening to this podcast right now who raised their alcoholic parents from the time they were 5 or 10 or 15 years old, or their parent who was strung out on some other substance, or a parent who was extremely depressed or anxious or really struggled with living functionally or parenting or whatever. And so it's not anything new. They're sitting there listening to this saying, yeah, I've been going through this my whole life. I didn't have to wait until my parent got to be 65 years old. My mom's been dependent on me. I help with my siblings. I've been struggling with this my whole life. And now I'm supposed to take care of them with this whole new set of challenges because they're getting older. I've done it. I've done enough. I don't want any part of it. So we have a choice, and we have to look and see what it is that we have in our hearts and in our energy in our own lives, what we feel we need to do in order to be able to look back and feel proud and at peace with ourselves that we did the best we could. That doesn't mean we go overboard and overcompensate and, pressure ourselves and live under the obligation and, the foot on our throat obligation that we have to do something. And then we build resentments. It means that we make peace within ourselves with what we can do, what we feel motivated and inspired to do, but we don't beat ourselves up because we're not doing everything that's possible. We've set a healthy boundary and a limit, and that's what we need to do for our own health and well-being, for our own family, for our own career, for our own marriage, if we're in a relationship, and so on. So I think all of us have a different bargain to make as our parents get older. And some of us have history that we need to factor in. I have 2 chapters on that in Raising an Aging Parent that speak specifically to us taking inventory to how is my history with my mom or dad affecting the way I want to approach their lives as they get older. Am I so full of resentment? Am I so full of guilt that I feel obligated to do too much? Am I clear? And we need to clear the slate so we can approach it in a way that's healthy for us and healthy for them.
That statement right there, that we need to do what is healthy for them and healthy for us, is not as clear as I would like it to be. It's very difficult to do this job without some layer of guilt. I've shared with you before that I do this for both my mother and my mother-in-law. And I personally feel that it's honoring them to do those things. And so I think I'm going to open an ugly can here real quick. And I'm an only child, so there's no ugly can. Either I show up or I don't. I show up, okay? But there are people who have siblings and spouses who don't, and they don't seem to care. And I think that sucks.
It does. And it leads to, it's the elephant in the room at every family gathering, if the family even gathers anymore. It's the elephant on the phone when siblings talk about their parents. It's the unspoken question, resentment that sits in the middle of our relationships and dilutes them and robs us, if we have siblings, of the potential connectedness and support and feelings that you get when you have a family that's close. But when we try to sweep these things under the rug and we fail to talk about them or to work out some things out, have the conversation with a sibling who has gone missing and say, it's really difficult, or a cousin who's gone missing. It could even be a cousin if there are no siblings. You're an only child. What about cousins who could show up? I was very close to some of my aunts and uncles, and I helped some of them, and I still have an aunt who's 93 who I go visit, and her kids really appreciate it because I can talk with her. She loves my books, and she loves reading articles and getting phone calls and visits when I'm in New York. But I add to what her own 2 daughters contribute to her life. What about cousins? So how do we have those conversations that help us get past the resentments that are building up with our siblings because they have gone missing? Or in some cases, we hear stories about a sibling who's not gone missing, but every time they come into town to spend time with mom or dad, they create hell. They stir up craziness. They undo everything that we've been doing. They try to take over out of guilt. And, they're going to redo mom's medical regimen, the medications, the doctors she's seeing, her will, her estate plan. They're going to redo everything because they know better. That produces craziness in families. And so how do we take the high road? How do we look at, hey, what is what I'm doing and what I'm saying and how I'm approaching these family matters going to create chaos or going to create connectedness and love and greater harmony and opportunities for us to do things, to create memories, beautiful memories as a family. And I think we all need to take that responsibility for whether we're part of the problem or part of the solution. And also, as you're saying, take inventory of, hey, might there be some ways that I could be taking better care of myself because I'm the only sibling or I'm the only one who's showing up? Might there be some ways that I can explore that I haven't yet realized that I could be taking better care of myself? And it might be something thinking outside the box. It might be, hey, I'm going to make it a point to go to church on Sunday morning, or to go to synagogue on Friday night, or to take time and learn how to meditate. I've always wanted to do that, or take that yoga class, or there's a beautiful park or a beach near my home. I'm going to make this year a time to go for walks in that park where I can reflect and I can air out and I can cry if I want to, or sing if I want to, or jog through that park if I need the exercise and I need to move my bones. So I think all of us have an opportunity to really take an audit, kind of a self-care audit, and take inventory. I actually have something called the Handbook of Self-Care that I give to people so that they can upgrade their self-care operating system to a professional grade self-care. I call it pro-grade self-care. And oftentimes I give training programs for people who work in hospitals, people who work in domestic violence programs, people who are in the military or work in service professions, or who are, have experienced compassion fatigue because they work with cancer patients and so on. And I talk with them and we do trainings on pro-grade self-care. And it's a very important upgrade that many of us need to make in our lives.
I do know that it's easier to cope with life in general when we're making sure that our cup it's full, it's filled and taken care of. But we were going back to, in my mind, I'm going back to the role reversal with parents and children and the confusion that's there. We can be caring for ourselves. We can be asking ourselves these questions, but that emotional journey of trying to, I know for me, honor their independence and allow them to live a life that still feels independent for them, but knowing that there are just some things that my life is busy. I can't just always drop things and go. So because I'm in the midst of that, I'm imagining that there are other people that this navigating the role reversal and then the responsibility, the burden of the responsibility, because it's not just physical, it's psychological and emotional and on some level spiritual. Because for me, my mom and mother-in-law are in their early 70s. They're still young. And I have friends who have parents in their 80s and their parents are like just trucking along in life and they're not even responsible for them. And it's just interesting to me. I didn't expect to have all of this at 52. I didn't expect it. I thought, maybe my late 50s, that might become more of a thing. So I had a plan and a path, and I there's got to be other people out there like me that, you get your kids raised and you get that in order, and then you're like, okay, now I'm going to, navigate this next season of my life. And then all of a sudden, nope.
That's right. Life turns on a dime, or sometimes life turns slowly, and we're standing in the ashes of our plan for our lives. And we're looking out and saying, what the hell am I supposed to do now? Am I supposed to surrender my dreams, my plans, my passions in sacrifice, and do this in service to an aging parent or a sibling who's fallen sick or a spouse who's fallen ill? What is my responsibility? And how can I set things up in such a way that I can take time and make time to have my own life and to take time off where I'm not constantly hyper vigilant and having to oversee everything that's going on in this unexpected responsibility that I've taken on. How can I do that? How do people do that? What would a good plan look like? So if I said to you, Gina, I want you, there's a conference, I want you as one of our speakers. It's in Paris.
Okay, I'm there.
It's part of the program is that we're all going to do some great things, and it's going to be thought leaders from all over the world. And I want you to be there, but you're going to have to put a plan together for taking care of the people that you're caregiving so that you can be away for 10 days. And I want you to ask them and work with them and find the resources and find people who could stand in for you. I want you to make this happen because I know that you've been telling yourself you can't afford to go to Paris and take this time off. Too much is at risk leaving them alone. But I'm telling you, you can't afford not to, because you will not be at peace within yourself if you don't make some decisions and choices to take care of your own passions, needs, to go on your own adventures in this life. This is also your life, and you need to tend to it. And I bet that the people you caregive would understand if you explain this is something I need to do, and you give them plenty of time in advance, and even to enroll them in problem solving, how they're going to be okay and what needs to happen while you're gone. And perhaps you even make a plan that, I'm going to want to do this twice a year. This is the direction my career is going and my passions are going, and time with my husband and nurturing our marriage is going. So we need to figure out a plan for this. That's the direction my life is going. And, that's the step that we need to take that balances our own care with the care that we're giving to the people we love and that we've taken responsibility for. I want to say one more thing.
Yes.
There's a piece of self-care that we often forget about. And I learned about in a very direct and difficult way. And that's the piece of checking we're taking inventory and we're doing an audit to check ourselves to see if our receiver is working. Now, what do I mean by our receiver? It's the part of us that accepts people's love and gratitude and appreciation, and that allows us to feel like we've done enough. That's what our receiver is. And if you're like me, you're somebody who's discovered that their receiver was broken and not really working well. I discovered that there were times in my life and in my past where people were trying to tell me and show me they loved me. And I was so busy that I deflected. It's like, yeah, thanks so much. There are audiences, I would give keynote speeches in front of large audiences, and I would run off the stage, leaving people incomplete because they didn't see me taking their gratitude for what I had just poured my heart and soul out to them. I just reached out and touched their hearts with what I was sharing. And they didn't see me taking something back, completing that transaction by taking back their gratitude. So I learned to put my hand on my heart as a way of opening my heart to the applause, to what people, the love and gratitude people were showing me with their applause. I learned to listen and to take in and to really fix my receiver so that I could take in people's love and appreciation when people were showing that to me. And I invite people who are listening to this podcast to think about, what shape is my receiver in? Am I able to feel like I've done enough? Am I taking in the love and appreciation that people are showing? Because that's part of self-care as well.
It sounds like there's a potential for that to lift the weight of the duty or the burden because it's so task oriented, and it can feel like there's no appreciation. And maybe, and you can speak to this, maybe our parents don't know how to show appreciation, because I think
Some of
it's
them don't.
difficult for our parents to give up what they perceive as their independence and their decision making as well. So the complexities come from their side.
Exactly. A parent who you've taken away the car keys isn't going to come up to you and say, thank you for having my back. Thank you for looking out for me in ways that I've not been looking out for myself. Rarely will we hear that gratitude and appreciation. We're blessed if we do. But whether or not we hear it, we need to feel gratitude from every source, including those ethereal sources. Sometimes walking in the sunlight, we can allow ourselves to feel the universe speaking to us, shining warm sunlight on our back, or displaying a rainbow in front of us, some element of beauty, or a beautiful yellow bird flies into our yard, or a hummingbird takes fluid from what we put out to feed it. And in those magical moments, and sometimes in the middle of nature, we're able to feel the appreciation, the blessing, the gratitude of the universe. And for those people who are more religiously inclined, of God, we're able to feel God's gratitude, God's acknowledgement, God's blessing and appreciation for the loving person that we have become, for the generosity of heart that we've shown in times where we could have turned away and become resentful, and for the way we're showing ourselves love, as one of God's children, if we're inclined to think that way. So there's gratitude on all levels and from all sources, even if it's not coming directly from a mother or a father who really understands the sacrifice that we're making in our lives, the time that we're taking out, the energy that's involved, the complexity of some of the situations we're trying to help them with.
Now, there's also the layer of, for some people, their parents have a lot of unlived life and they now have time on their hands, and there's a lot of regret. So when you step in to become a caregiver, you don't always have, the person may or may not be happy. The person may or may not be cooperative. The person may or may not, make it easy for you. So if we have people out there that are saying, but my dad is difficult, he's like a burr under my saddle. What advice do you have for someone who may potentially have, I'm lucky I don't have this, but I know there are people who have belligerent parents, like they're just like, it's like the roles have reversed so much that they're like a 2-year-old and you can't reason with them. How do you handle raising an aging parent who is literally being difficult for difficulty's sake?
Yep. That's the $1 million question. How many of our parents are depressed, lonely, resentful, angry, remorseful, apologetic, as they kind of look back, as they look ahead and they wonder how much time they have and what kind of quality of life they will have going forward. They're also looking back across the landscape of their own life. And how do we show up? The first thing we do to show up is to become a good listener. The best thing we can do is what we used to do with our kids, is to be with them, is to listen, to give them the strong sense that, because there's nothing more powerful than the feeling of being understood, to give them the strong sense that we understand them. We're not there to fix them, because some of us have slipped into a figure it out and fix it mode. We feel like every time a parent says, I'm lonely, or this is going on, or that's going on, or presents us with a new challenge to their health or their living situation, we have to fix it. And rather than starting with, let's fix it, start with, Dad, what I'm hearing is that this is a very difficult and lonely time for you. Or Mom, I know you're really worried about Dad. There are things that he's done for the last 60 years, and now he's not here, or he's not going to be here in a couple of months. It looks like Dad is fighting hard, but his life is winding down. And, Mom, I hear how scared you are and how concerned you are. And to allow our aging parents to air out without us jumping in and fixing them. Let them draw them out with open-ended questions about what they're going through, what their biggest fears are, and what they think. It's the same thing we do to empower our kids. What do they think should be done, can be done, would help to do? What do they think their options are about these conditions that they're expressing to you? And get the benefit of what they believe, because often, as with our kids, the answers, they already have the answers. They just need somebody to listen and to bless the answers and to say, Mom, that makes so much sense to me, what you're saying. Let's do that. Or would you like me to look into that for you? So to empower our parents, our aging parents, by helping them air out, to think about their options, to come up with suggestions, to be part of controlling their own future, is extremely important as a first step. The second step is to help them think about what can be done, what action steps. And not every parent's going to come up with a lot of options. So often we could be ready and willing with a couple of suggested options. Dad, what would it be? What do you think about this? Or Mom, what do you think about this? Or mother-in-law, what do you think about this? Or father-in-law, what do you think about this? Or is there something else that you feel would be better? So I think staying in the question-asking mode and exploring what they want, and then suggesting what you think might be a good option, but also being open to finding out that it's not an option that's acceptable to them right now. And sometimes that first pass of bringing something up, all it does is bring up their defenses, their fears, their resistance. They become oppositional, defiant parents. So sometimes we have to be patient and allow these new ideas to simmer a little bit and for them to settle in. I went through something in my own family where one of my aging parents was going to have to, after being in the hospital, go into a residential care community for a couple of weeks. And my mother said, he's not going in there. He's not going in there. That was her first response. And I had to say, Mom, think about it. Do you really think Dad can be home? That you're going to give him his shots and his medication, take his blood pressure, do blood counts, and 100 other things that need to be done to make sure that he stays okay. And the more she thought about it, 24 hours later, she said, you know what? You had a good idea. That's the right thing to do. So oftentimes it's our patience that allows resistance to fall away. So don't be impatient. Don't get into fights with your parent who's being difficult and resistive. And I think, lastly, you really want to follow up in a timely way on what's been decided. And follow up and find the resources. Ask questions of their doctors, of caregivers, of professionals who know a great deal and work in the realm of gerontology, of how to support aging parents. Ask questions and become educated. Immerse yourself in learning about the resources that exist in our communities, that can help you, that can be a part of helping your parents at this difficult time.
I love the idea of staying in the question. I think because we're in different seasons of life, I think midlife, and the reason I started the podcast is there's so much going on. There's so much responsibility. We're moving at a breakneck speed, right? Patience is a very difficult thing to practice when life is going at that speed.
Yep. We've got to unplug from the figure it out and fix it mode to the being with mode. My older daughter always used to say when she was a little girl, "Daddy, be with." What did she mean? She meant, "Dad, don't try to fix this. Just be with me. Meet me in this place. Listen to me. Let me tell you how I think or what I'm thinking or how I feel. Be with me. Don't try to fix me or figure me out." And it's a different mode. It's a different way of being present. We all want to show up and be present. So if we're in the habit of figure out and fix, unplug from the figure out and fix mode and try the be with mode. And that's the place where we ask open-ended questions, where we're patient, where we really allow someone to speak for themselves, for how they feel. And we slowly, patiently explore the options that are available, not by trying to take control and overpower, but by empowering our parents, supporting and raising them up. And then in those times that we need to kind of ratchet up a little bit and do the tough love thing or take over a little bit when we need to protect them, as much as we do with our kids. We don't let our kids drive when they're 8 years old and they say, "Daddy, can I drive the car?" Nor do we let our 85-year-old father drive when he says, "Give me the keys." And, he's been stopping at green lights and he's almost caused several accidents. And he's risking taking somebody's life or losing his own. So there are those times we need to step up and take responsibility with our aging parents. But most of the time, we can work with them. That's the ideal. And with patience, we can even do better than we thought we could.
My last question, and then we can wrap up with your top 3 takeaways, is the difficult decision of when a parent shouldn't be living alone anymore. Navigating that very emotional decision of putting someone outside of the home that they've lived in. Do you have any kind of insight on how that could be navigated?
Yeah, I think the effective way to communicate about that is to open the line of conversation about that subject in a gentle way as early as possible. So if your parent's younger, you might say, "Dad, if there ever comes a time where it might be difficult for you to live alone, would you be open to, and living in the family house and mowing the lawn and cleaning the rain gutters and, having all the responsibilities for a big house, if that would become too much, what would be a good downsizing option for you? Where would you want to be? Who would you want to be with? What kind of life would you want to have?" And I think opening that line of conversation early is the way to kind of nurture and to say, "Dad, I'm just checking in with you." Later on you could say, "Dad, I'm just checking in with you. You're living alone now. You've told me that, at times you are forgetting or you've forgotten to do this or that it's lonely. Would this be a good time for us to talk about what the options are, where you could be living, where there might be more people, more support, more resources, so you could have the kind of life that you want right now." Your doctor has also said that, these are the conditions you're going to have to take care of. You're not, 35 anymore. Choosing a place that has the options, kind of an independent living, but with medical resources might be a good consideration. What do you think? And kind of nurturing the conversation about that, not forcing it, but nurturing it. And I think allowing your father or mother to kind of come to that conclusion themselves. gives them the great sense that they are in control of those decisions. It makes them a stakeholder in the success. And if you force them into an independent living community or whatever, they can always look back and say, I never wanted to come here in the first place. This was your idea. And resentment can brew. Whereas if you've kind of brought them along and helped them think critically about this decision and what's best for them, it's their decision. And they'll have more of a sense of ownership in the success of that decision.
Yeah, I like that. I know for some people that may come quicker. They may not have as much time to have that conversation, but thank you for that. So as our time always goes quickly when we're together, what top 3 takeaways in raising an aging parent, or what 3 kind of jumping off points would you like to share with people? Because we've covered a lot of ground, all of it so timely and so practical. Let's say someone's driving and you say, okay, I've got 2-3 minutes with you. Here's 3 things I really want you to take away. What would those be?
Number 1, lead with compassion. Compassion, understanding, patience for your aging parent if you are the adult child, and self-compassion for yourself. Compassion for yourself. Kindness, support, encouragement for yourself. Number 2, after you've set the tone of all communications with compassion and you're ready to communicate compassionately, be forthright. Open conversations that are necessary. They're the lifeblood of what's going to happen between you and your parents and in your family. Open conversations. You're going to be so glad. I wrote a blog recently called I'm so glad we talked about it, about all the conversations that we're so glad. I'm so relieved that we talked about it. Allow those conversations to flow once you've set a compassionate tone. And 3, acknowledge yourself. Life, this is the hard part of life. There are so many things happening that are sources of sorrow, of what we feel when the seasons of life change, how we feel about our parents getting older. This is the cycle of life. And summoning the courage and the faith and allowing life to be what it is will afford you a deeper sense of peace. That this is the way of life and this is the way it goes. And at times it's going to suck. At times it's going to hurt. At times it's going to be so sad. But I need to focus on the blessings and the gifts that I've been afforded and live the kind of life to pay those things forward to my kids, grandkids, and future generations. And I know that my kids are watching me and how I am with my aging parent or parents, and to set a tone and an example of patience, compassion, and love that they will someday hopefully follow.
In thinking about that, then we can be, I think, in reverse, nurturing the kind of relationship that we want with our children as adults to adults. And we can initiate those conversations for our children about our future.
Exactly. Because we've had them, we've initiated them, and we know the benefit and the value of doing it. So we've changed the culture. Epigenetics, we've literally evolved to higher ground. When we've done it, we set the tone and the example for future generations to be more open and communicative, compassionate, forgiving, supportive, and allowing.
So if we are doing it for our parents, we can also mentor our children in that process ahead of time, right? To make their journey. They're watching us, but we can also navigate with them what's going to eventually, even like now, it wouldn't seem like a conversation. I'm 52, they're in their 20s, but if they know what I'm going through and we can talk about what we might go through, we have more time to ease into the reality in case it comes sooner than we expect.
Yep. And in Raising an Aging Parent, I invite people to write down all the things we've learned raising and watching our parents get older and supporting them, that we want to remind ourselves about when we are the aging parent. Ways that our parents were difficult, ways they could have been more compassionate, ways they could have been more patient and understanding of our life. We can learn, we can become our own teachers and write letters to ourselves, the self of the future, as reminders of the person we want to become as we get older.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. Well, Dr. Ken, where can people find you in your book?
Well, the book, go on Amazon, Raising an Aging Parent, or just enter my name, my last name, Druck, D-R-U-C-K. You can go on my website, www.kendruck.com, or my Facebook page, Dr. Ken Druck, D-R-K-E-N, D-R-U-C-K, and you'll be able to find your way to me and the books and other articles and this broadcast, because we will be playing it again out to my large Facebook audience to share the wealth of what you and I discussed today, Gina, and I thank you so much.
I really appreciate you sharing your time, your experience, your wisdom in such a compassionate and clear way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, today I've been speaking with Dr. Ken Druck. He's a thought leader, an author, and a speaker. And if you head over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 132, you will find links to all of the things that Dr. Ken has shared. There will be show notes. So in case you're driving, don't worry. You can head over there, click those hyperlinks, and get your copy of this book and other books that he has written. As always, while you're at my website, would you please leave your name and email address? Join my tribe. I periodically send out some encouragement and some thoughts, and I would love to share my life with you there. If you are listening on Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to Feminine Roadmap, please rate, subscribe, and share with your friends. I know many, many people who are in this boat right now, raising their aging parents, grappling with the emotional challenges and the actual challenges of how do we do this in a way that's respectful and honoring to them and respectful and honoring to us. So thank you for joining us for this conversation today. And again, please share it with someone you know who needs to be encouraged with some tools and strategies to help them navigate this very difficult and sometimes messy season of life. Thank you so much for being a part of my tribe, my friends. Thank you for grabbing a cup of something wonderful every week and joining me. I look forward to sharing more inspiration, more tips and strategies as time goes on. Thank you again. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.